Hey everybody, hope you can hear me okay. I'm John Mancini, Principal Product Manager with Vectra. I normally spend my time helping to develop the product at Vectra to help detect and identify threats impacting everything from the network to identity to the cloud. Today, though, I'm going to be wearing a different hat for you all. I'm going to be operating as a SOC analyst, as a good guy in an attack which my colleague, who I'll let him introduce himself, is going to be running. We want to show you today what it looks like for an attack to be run with a identity using real world techniques, and then how you can see those activities ultimately stop an attack and help shift left security operations when you have the right visibility. So I'll hand it over to my APT attacker colleague here right now.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Arpan Sarkar. I am the Senior Technical Marketing Engineer here at Vectra AI. I primarily focus on threat hunting and cloud security side of things. And for today, I'm going to be your APT attacker. For the record, John thought that he was the better looking of the two of us to be the good guy here today. It wasn't my choice, but hey, what are you going to do? This is going to be a very quick, fun, and informative session on purple teaming and how you can do red teaming and blue teaming within your own environments. We will consider we have got roughly 15 minutes or give or take to go through the attack side of this exercise. To do this, we will need two very important things. The first one would be an attack tool to help us get through the testing. And the second one, very, very important, is Black Hoodie, because stealth, you know. Well, I have already got the hoodie on, so let's go ahead and get started with the testing and the attack tool. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Give it a second. John, can you confirm when it's on?
Yep, see the big blue screen.
Awesome. Okay. So for this session, we are going to use an attack tool called MadAF. And the reason for that is because, well, for one, I'm the one who created it, so I'm a little bit biased here. But for second, and the more important part, it's built for situations exactly like this, where you want to test your environment, but you want to do it effectively and you want to do it really quickly. So you can do testing more often and more regularly. MadAF, despite what most people believe, stands for M365 and Azure AD Attack Framework. It's an open source tool. So it's free to use. You can review it, you can add to it, contribute to it. And it's really, really easy to set up. In fact, there is no setup at all. You can simply download the tool and start testing with it. So that's what we're going to do. To download it, you can simply clone it or download it off of GitHub. And once you have it downloaded, you can go into PowerShell and just navigate to the directory where you have MadAF downloaded. So I'll have it in desktop, MadAF. And if you look into the MadAF directory, you will see a bunch of different files in here. You can go through them if you're interested. But essentially, if you want to start testing and start attacking with MadAF, all you need to do is execute the madattack.ps1 file here. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. Now, I'm also going to use a parameter here called force bypass dependency check. Essentially, when you start MadAF, there is no real setup to do, but it will start looking for dependencies within your environment. And if it somehow doesn't find one of the dependencies, it's going to go ahead and install them for you. But in this case, I already know that I got all the dependencies. So I am just going to skip the dependency check, and that's going to save us a couple of minutes. Well, once we are in, it's going to give you this menu screen, which we call as the MadAttack Arsenal, which gives you a bunch of different modules. And what each of these modules does is they contain different techniques that you can use to test against your environment. And if you want to look into what each of these modules hold, you can always just say show all, and it's going to list out all the different techniques that are within each of these modules. So that's a brief intro of the tool that we will be using today. Now let's get to the actual testing bit. So we will, before we start testing, we want to know what exactly are we going to test, right? So let's draw out a quick plan for us. All we'll do is we'll go to Attack Navigator, and we will, for this session, we're going to test a compromised identity within the Microsoft environment. So I'm going to go into enterprise attack. Let's see. I'm going to filter this down to just the Microsoft techniques. All right, that looks good. And then let's say for this session, we're going to try to test our environment against some of the techniques for an APT group. So let's first expand the sub-techniques. All right, and then back in here. And for the choice of APT group, I am going to go with something recent. Let's go with scatter spider. G somewhere here. Okay, A. Well, I was looking in the wrong thing. Nobody told me. All right. So for the thread group, we're going to look into scatter spider. And we can do QRS. And there we go. There we have it. So we're going to filter for all of the techniques that are associated with this APT group, scatter spider. We're going to mark them color. All right. Awesome. So we have a bunch of different techniques in here, but of course, we want to narrow it down a little bit more because we want to do this in a 15-minute session. So let's say we will start off with, let's go through this. We will start off with initial access. We'll use a compromised account to perform our initial access, which is going to be your testing account. The next thing we want to do is establish persistence within the environment. So we'll go through creating a backdoor account, and we will also assign some privileges to it. So we will assign additional crowd roles. And that's going to allow us to do some actions with that backdoor account in future. Then we want to also do some defense evasion techniques. So we will test against, let's say, modifying conditional access policies, and we'll also put in hiding email hiding rules. And finally, we'll do some discovery and reconnaissance activities. We will do that right after we perform initial access. So we'll throw that in as well. And then ultimately, we will do some exfiltration or collection from one of the data repositories, such as SharePoint. So that looks like a good chunk of testing we want to do. So let's dive right into it. So I'll go back into MadAF. The first thing you want to do is have a set of testing credentials. I already have them in here. And what you can also do is you can go into access and you can store them within the tool itself. So that way you can call those credentials without having to type in the username and password every single time. I already have my credentials stored in here. I'm going to go ahead and start establishing access. You can go in, you can establish access using each of these individual modules to establish access to a particular service or module. But if you want to just want the tool to just enumerate through all the different services, all the different modules, and see where it can gain access, you can just choose all, and it's going to enumerate through all of them and see wherever you can get access. So it's going to go through a couple of these, and if you have MFA enabled, it's going to prompt you for MFA and give you any options that it needs confirmed. All right, we got access to Teams. And then we'll give it a couple of minutes to try to go through some of the other modules in the list. Okay, Exchange Online. Next, it's attempting for SharePoint. Almost there, almost there. And in case if you're using a testing credential based on its privileges and its access, you might or might not be able to gain access to any one of these modules, and that's perfectly fine. This is going to let you know that you don't have access to a particular service. And once it's done establishing all the access, what it's going to do is it's going to run a preliminary reconnaissance within the environment where it's going to go ahead and fetch a bunch of different information that you can probably use throughout your testing. So things like, here's the tenant that you're connected to, so the tenant ID for it. Here's the user that you're connected as. Here are all the different services and PowerShell modules that you're connected to, or that you have authenticated with. The different roles that are assigned to you within the environment. Your group membership, so you know what groups you're part of, and then you can go after them. If you own any objects within the environment, so applications and things of those nature, it's going to list out those as well. So that's a good bit of information to keep handy, and you can always call show access info from within MADAF, and you can always bring up an updated list of all of this collected information. Great. So we're in. Let's get started with our testing. The first thing we want to do is initial access, which we've already completed. Once we're in, what we want to do is we want to establish persistence within the environment. But actually, before that, let's go ahead and do some reconnaissance and make sure that we have access and we can collect different bits of information within the environment. So for that, we'll go into module 3, which is recon. And in here, you'll have a bunch of different options to collect information. For now, we're going to start with collecting just the accounts and let's say the mailboxes within the environment. So I'm going to choose option 1, and then it's going to go ahead and try to fetch all the different accounts it can find within the Azure AD/Entra ID environment, and it says it has found 814 accounts, which Matt has already saved within the outputs directory, so you can always reference this. But if you want to take a quick look at it, you can say yes, and then it's going to pop up this window. And show you all the different results that it found, their object ID, username, user principal name, their membership type, all those things. You can keep it handy. If you close it, you can always come back to it and get this information again. Now we're going to continue, and then we're also going to try to list out mailboxes within the environment. So I'm going to say option 11. That's find all the mailboxes. So it's going to enumerate through all the mailboxes and try to see the ones that it can find. So in this case, it found about 10 mailboxes. And again, it's saved in the outputs folder, so you can always reference it back. I'm just going to say no for now. We don't want to see them. And then continue. So we have access to all the different services. We're able to collect some of this information. Now let's go ahead and establish persistence within the environment, so that in case we lose access to this initially compromised account, we can always get back in and maintain our access. So for that, it's an action that you would take on an account. So that's option 4, module 4. Once you're in, it will give you a bunch of different techniques that you can execute against an account. So what we want to do is deploy a backdoor account. So I'm going to choose option 2 and dive into it. It's going to give you a brief reference of MITRE and link to it. So if you want to understand more about the technique, you can always jump into visit the link and look at it. If you press continue, it's going to run a reconnaissance and find all of the available domains. And then it's going to give you this prompt and response interface where you can go through the configuration of deploying a backdoor account. So it's asking me to give me a username. So I'm just going to say open scattered spider, and I'm going to choose demo lab. Okay, so that's the domain over here, and I'm going to press enter. And then I'm going to need to give it a password. You can give it any password. Just going to come up with something. And keep it handy if you want, but I actually don't need to, because in this case, anytime there is a module that's either creating a new set of credentials or you're obtaining a new set of credentials by executing a technique within the environment, what MADF is going to do is store those credentials for you, and so that you can use them automatically across any of the modules. So that's what it's telling here. MCS, the credentials are stored. And then the other good thing is if you're just testing with an environment where you want to simply generate telemetry and don't really care about anything else, and you want to leave the environment a little bit cleaner, what MADF does is it allows you to undo an action at the end of each technique, depending on what you're trying to test. If you're trying to test end-to-end from your detection coverage to all the way to response and how you remediate things, you might not want to undo any of the actions. But if the goal is simply to test a detection, test coverage within the environment, you might choose to undo actions at the end of every technique. So I'm just going to say no here. I don't want to delete anything. Just going to continue. Great. We have created a backdoor account, but it's pretty much useless for us right now. What we want to do is also assign it some privileges, so we are able to get back in and do some actions. So I'm going to choose option 3, which is assigning an Azure AD directory role to an account. So I'm going to choose option 3. Again, it's going to give you a brief MITRE reference. You get into the module, you get into the technique, and then walk through the prompt and response. So it's going to ask me which account do I want to assign role to. I'm just going to hit the up arrow to get my previous. So this was the backdoor account I created. And say choose this account. It's going to validate that it could find that account within Entra ID. And that's just one extra round of validation that it was created. Then it's going to ask us what role do we want to assign it. If you know a role, you can always just type it in. In case you don't, you can always leave it blank and just press enter, and then it's going to run a reconnaissance within the environment, try to find all the different directory roles. So let's take a look at it. I'm going to get back in and at least try to deploy. So we'll go with the security administrator in this case, and let's try to give it security admin permissions. And you can type in half role names, and it's going to try to match within the closest role it can find. So there you go. It found security administrator. Now it's attempting to assign that role to my backdoor account, and there we have it. Great. So we have the backdoor account, and now if we go back in to access, and if I say show available credentials, I should have my backdoor account available to me. This was my backdoor account, and now I can use it. If I want to, I can start performing future actions with this account. So we'll go back. We'll continue on our trajectory. The next set of actions that we wanted to do, where we created a backdoor account, we assign privileges. Next, we want to do some defense evasion techniques. In that case, we're going to do modification of conditional access policies and email hiding rules. So to make changes to conditional access policies, we can go into option 7, which is Azure AD, and that's where you can find modified trusted IP config. So let's say we have a resource, or we have certain access to certain resources that are guarded by conditional access policies that require to come from a trusted location. What we can do is we can add ourselves our location as a trusted name location, adding our IP to the configuration. So in this case, it's asking me, give me a name for this new trusted policy. So I'm just going to say Arpan, spider, just come up with something. And then what you can also do is you can give it a static IP if you have one, or if you just want to create a policy, you can leave this blank, and it's going to query your public DNS, your DNS right now, and get your public IP, and then you can use that directly to configure this policy. Just gonna say continue, use that, and it's going to create that payload and deploy that name location within the Entra ID environment. Again, once it's done, it's going to give you a brief information of the policy that was created. This was the name. This is the policy object ID. If you want to keep it handy for reference later on during the investigation, here's the IP range that was added. And then it's asking me if I want to undo this. I said no, continue. Great. Next, let's get into Exchange and try to deploy a email deletion rule. So just to delay that little bit of alerting in case the security teams find out that this account has been compromised. So I'm going to say option 4, which is delete a mailbox rule. You can do a bunch of different things in here as well. Like for collection, you can set up mail forwarding rule, disable auditing so you don't collect audit logs on this mailbox. For now, let's continue with the deletion rule. Once we're in, it's going to walk us through the configuration. It's asking me enter a mailbox address to set up deletion rule on. I'm going to continue targeting the account that I will start that I compromised. I'm going to do Michael Scott. And first, it's going to validate that it could find that mailbox within the environment and we have access to it. So find the mailbox. Now we're going to go through the process of deploying the rule. So in this case, we're going to deploy rule called. Okay, and then it's going to ask me what are the keywords that you want to configure in this rule. So we're going to say breach, hack, compromise, alert, security. So hide all of these, any of the emails that come in with any of these keywords within the mailbox, within the email subject or within the email body. And that way we're going to hide any of the alerting that comes to this mailbox. So we're going to give it a couple of seconds. There we go. We have the rule deployed. We have the rule enabled. So any incoming emails in future with any of those keywords will be hidden from the compromised mailbox. Finally, let's go ahead and do some data collection. So for that, we're going to go to compliance. We can also go to SharePoint directly to fetch files from SharePoint. But in this case, we'll try to use compliance, which is eDiscovery, and try to see if we can create a new search. So we're going to go ahead and create a new search and try to see if we can gather information by creating a new eDiscovery search within the environment. So I'm just going to say Dundee research case. And MATF is going to try to deploy a new case. And once it's successful in doing that, it's going to ask us if we want to create a new search within that case. So I'm just going to use the same name, search. And now let's give it keywords that we're looking for. So I'm looking for, let's say, tokens within the environment, anything that starts with pass or password or secret or credential. Okay, that looks good. And then right now, MATF is going to go ahead and try to deploy. Before that, it's going to ask us, do we want to narrow it down to a specific location? In this case, I want to collect from SharePoint. So I'm going to say, look within SharePoint for any of those keywords. I'm going to say option 2, continue. And now it's going to go ahead and deploy all that configuration, deploy that new search and run that against the environment and come back with results it could find. As next steps, we would go ahead and try to use eDiscovery to exfiltrate all the data collected. So for now, we're going to let this run, and I'm going to hand it back to John to see how we would see some of these things from the more important defensive side of things. Over to you, John.
Awesome. That was. It's always fun to watch when you're pretending to be a defender, the attacker doing everything because you know exactly what to look for, and including the account and all these things. But I'll pretend that I don't have that cheat code as I go through this next stage. I actually won't even need that from the way I'm looking at this. Before I kind of walk you through the SOC analyst perspective of what Arpan just showed, I want to take a step back and run back 3 key things that I saw in Arpan going through this. We're not far into this webinar, and let's call it 15 minutes. Arpan, as his APT attacker hat was put on, was able to run absolute havoc with this account in that time. End-to-end attack, lots of persistence, tons of progression and techniques got accessed and run. So groups like Scattered Spider, any of these ransomware groups that are doing these types of attacks to gain a foothold and progress, they're doing it really, really fast. The second thing is he skipped kind of a piece here, that initial access. And I want to make sure everyone understands that that's not that hard for attackers to do either. There's other kits that are dedicated to testing that framework out, phishing kits, things designed with MFA bypass in mind that use proxies to trick users to steal tokens. There's credential theft from third parties, or even tactics like MFA bombing that just give the pathways in. So while we kind of skip that part of how ARPAN got those creds, that part is 100% in the realm of things to track here in terms of how defenders can stop. And there's so many of them. The reason why it's good to have a path to seeing it is because that's a hard thing to stop ultimately with all the ways that it can progress. The last thing to call out, number 3, is the attack that got ran here would lead to damage. In Azure AD and M365, data would move. But there's no reason that a real attacker, especially someone like Scattered Spider, would stop there. The path is forged at this point with everything that ARPAN did to get to Azure, to get to AWS, to get to GCP, to get back to the traditional network with the credentials he has, the access, the content, the intel he has. And so this is just the start of a journey here. And so with kind of these 3 takeaways, I think that the immediate statement is, from a defender's perspective, there needs to be ability to see this activity that just happened, see it early, and overall just respond to these types of threats. And so this is a problem that we've been tracking now for a long time, and it's solved in the Vectra platform. So to show you what that looks like, I'm going to pull up the Respond UX version of the Vectra platform. This is our new kind of interface for those that haven't seen it, and walk you through exactly what it looks like from the defender side, following everything that ARPAN did. Fast forward a little bit forward just for the sake of the demo here, and with some caveats because it is a demo. But you'll see ARPAN's account. You'll see how I could respond to it. You'll see the activity that's there. So let me pull up a share screen real quick, and we'll dive right in. ARPAN, can you confirm you see?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the Vectra console. This is within the Respond UX, and immediately I said that I can cheat because I know the account that ARPAN was using because I was just watching him. With the Respond UX and the Vectra coverage here for Azure AD or Entra AD and M365, I don't need a cheat. You can see that MScott account that he was using is in the console. It's been prioritized. It's visible here because of the activity, because of the actions that he was executing that bring this into the prioritization view. For the sake of kind of walking through what this looks like, I want to focus on kind of an older account that is John DeMam. Just for my own fun and just because I know exactly what I'm going to be looking at here and can give you a good idea of what's there. What you can see is that in this console, this account, and both accounts actually, have been prioritized. This is the Vectra urgency score, basically a combination of Vectra's understanding of how threatening the behaviors that we've seen are. So essentially this combination of the attack phases, attack profile, as well as how important this particular asset, account or host, is in the environment. Combining those 2 together gets to this urgency score of 100 and gives that clarity of understanding what's going on. And this, you can see this score of 90 for the MScott demo lab account that ARPAN was using, as well as for this one that he ran for me earlier. The key factors that are driving this are that importance. This is incorporated basically from either inputting it into the system or letting the AI understand privileges of these identities to define this, and the attack kind of progression here. And the attack progression ultimately is defined by the actual activity that's detected in the course of the time that's being monitored. And so you can see in running an attack framework like MADAF, or really in any real attack, a lot of behavior gets escalated and becomes visible in the Vectra console as that attacker progresses through from that initial access through to the modification of privilege operations in the environment, to finding data, searching for data, and then eventually even the exfil portion as they progress there. And so to give you a sense of that, I can click into this account and we can take a look more. So this is a view of basically all those behaviors that mirror the actions that ARPAN did. I'll immediately come right out and say there's some of these are filtered by AI. This is stuff that happens when you continuously repeat a behavior in the framework that we've built. It's a huge benefit to analysts because this is a demo lab and we've repeated this story a few times. The AI kind of got clued in, this is normal behavior, and filter it out. But from the standpoint of what I want to share with you, you can see all the behaviors that the attacker did here correlated together in time to give you the context of what the attacker did in Azure AD and M365. I can clearly see as a defender that this has been part of an attack. And so it took a lot of my own patience as Arpan was running through this and kind of my desire for him to be successful to not go into the console as he was operating and immediately take a response because I knew he was doing it or because I knew the detections were triggering. And I could have done just that. So you see a lot here. It didn't need to progress this far. I have the ability to lock this account as I see this behavior or set it to automatically lock. And when I say lock here, I mean two things. We have the option of revoking the sessions. This would force Arpan to do an MFA reprompt, basically invalidating any stolen tokens that he had, invalidating the fact that he had a password, or straight up lock the account. And this would have really bought me a ton of time to respond to what he was doing and made for a probably less interesting workshop that we're working through right here. But this could have happened at any time in this attack. And we let Arpan do a lot of things, but ultimately in those first few steps, we would have seen detections triggering in the console that would have driven this prioritization score, especially when factoring in that high importance of this identity, that would have allowed me to stop them, know to stop them, and keep him from progressing as far as he did. There's a lot of behavior that I'm showing here, and it really all mirrors the things that Arpan was doing. Everything from his sign in here, from a location, the use of PowerShell, which we'll talk a little bit about, to the things that he was doing regarding basically modifying permissions of the account and accessing data in eDiscovery, modifying those rules, changing that IP configuration to add that persistence, or even one of his really early actions where he added an admin account as a backdoor into this operation, being really sly with the J0HN instead of the JOHN in this case. There's a lot of behavior here. And for any of these things that are being flagged, there's the opportunity to dig in with a double click and see exactly this behavior in detail, see exactly what was going on, the details of the operation, the normal identities executing some of these operations to run a full investigation here. But what's really also powerful beyond just the ability for this to be prioritized with these detections and the rich context that they have is the fact that I have the opportunity to dig deeper in the console without having to click on another tool or pull up a SIM. I can go into what's called instant investigations here, and this will bring up an entirely new experience for kind of an analyst that's working here. Instead of having to go write complex queries against the 6+ different Azure AD logs that have different naming conventions for the fields that represent who's the identity, Vectra is able to organize the data around what a identity does in this Q&A format. So you're seeing kind of the question of what were the sign-in activities? What was the exchange activity? What was the SharePoint activity? Not needing to know what those log names are, not needing to know anything about them. As an analyst, I can hit expand all and get instant access to the core information I need to understand what was happening. I can see the sign-ins, I can double click in, see information about OS info that was used, browser info, as well as this loads in more details of the service and the login that was happening here. The same rule applies for things like Exchange. We can see that spam rule getting shown in the raw logs here, just like we did in the detection events, but gives me the ability for full visibility to everything that was done in the course of this. Now, it's really interesting. Arpan didn't show this in his current run through of this attack, but one set of techniques that is kind of something we've been tracking at Vectra in terms of attacker actions is actually the abuse of Copilot. And so you can see here in this instance, the John D-Man account actually had Copilot as an interaction point. And so what we're able to do is through clicking investigate further here, we can pivot into a full perspective of all the logs that underpin those Copilot interactions, as well as all the other data streams that are being tracked, with that Vectra optimized view of identity. And this lets us look and see exactly the files that could have been accessed with this kind of LLM backend used by Microsoft that attackers can find and leverage to accelerate their attacks and progress kind of faster in the face of kind of the tooling that they can find. So really living off the land techniques that they can abuse to progress their attack. Something ARPAN didn't show, but something that we're 100% tracking as an attacker technique that's valid out there right now. Jumping back to kind of the account itself, and this actually is true, you saw ARPAN using MATAF, and you saw PS1 here. All these kind of commands that were being run were being executed with PowerShell, and Vectra can alert in all the different versions of PowerShell, all the different ways it can manifest here. But one thing beyond just alerting that Vectra can do is Vectra can help call out opportunities to shift left for things like users that are using PowerShell as their means of progression. And the way that we are able to do that is through a functionality in the Respond UX called the Discover dashboard. This is part of our active posture capability that's designed to audit for really notable and risky events that are associated with attacks that could happen in the future, but may not be attacks right now. And the objective here is to give the context for security teams to see what normal users are doing and whether that aligns with what you'd expect. And this gives the opportunity to then go make changes to things like conditional access policies, permissions, the ability to change and delete existing accounts. And for the context of things like PowerShell, you can audit who exactly is using PowerShell in any of those different formats to see, yes, John D-Man did have PowerShell, MScott did have PowerShell active now for a considerable amount of time, and ask the question, should they? Because the opportunity then becomes for you to go in, make changes to conditional access policies that block this so that an attacker could never have this opportunity to run a tool like MAD and actually stop an attack here. And there's more. There's the conditional access values for PowerShell, for the Graph API, removing for auditing of countries, so changing conditional access policies here as attackers leverage VPNs to show up in locations. It's not always enough to just lock down location, but it is a good way to progress and have a proactive defense and shift left. All that's to say here, as I kind of click through all the different things in the console, if I were to kind of put a scoreboard up of ARPAN versus me in this, I would have gone in the first few minutes of ARPAN's talk, clicked in and locked him out. But I wanted to give him a chance to progress and a chance for you to all see how you can run a test in your environment with a really powerful attack tool, and then how Vectra can come in and a defender can come in and actually stop this type of attack from running through. So I think there's some collateral that we've added into the kind of system here that you can see how you can learn more about running MATAF yourself. There's some ability to kind of test out the Vectra console from that purple team perspective here as well. But we're also here on the call for a little bit longer to take any of your questions that you might have. So feel free to put them in the chat and we can jump on them. I'll wait a minute for people to ask some questions and see if they're there. Otherwise, I can go through kind of some of the questions that I know are commonly asked as we go through these kind of exercises. So I'll jump in and throw kind of a question that I hear a lot about as we kind of look at this is the question around kind of native tooling and how we kind of work well with that native tooling. So Microsoft does have visibility into their system, but they're really focused on giving awesome compliance and awesome prevention opportunities. There's some things they're not doing, like our active posture on the prevention side, that we're really able to help. But one of the things that you saw in that console is a lot of coverage for the things that the attackers are doing. And that is something that we're really able to help in terms of complementing Microsoft solutions and native alerting by going significantly further in the space of living off the land techniques, which is ultimately the bulk of what we find attackers are doing. And so this is really able to drive security operations in a different direction when you have that real-time visibility to what attackers are doing and the opportunity to not just opportunistically prevent an attack, but to see it happening if it does get in and know you have the visibility to stop it. With that, I think we're at time. So if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to us at Vectra. We're always happy to chat. Please take a look at MatAF and see how you can test this in your own environment and kind of better understand how attackers could operate there. So thank you all. I appreciate your time.